right, do it right. Do it right, do it right, do it. Hey! Welcome back to the TheEZGZ garage. I didn't see you standing there. Come on in. Come on in. Here, let me get that door for you, or window, or how about the camera stand? So you guys didn't like my music video. Well, I made that video like 20 times with me talking, and it was like, to get the same information, it took about 3 friggin' hours. I couldn't, I got sick of the sound of my own voice and trying to edit it, and I just thought, okay, just cut it out and show you the video. But it seems like there's a lot of you guys that like to hear my voice, so I'm gonna waterboard you this morning. I hope the blood don't start running out of your ears, but if it does, it's your fault. So what's happening here? Well, to summarize it, this is that single relief case that I've been dragging around the floor for 2 years. I don't need another engine. I've got a 1776, an 1800, a 2-liter, 2110, 2276. I got 4 cars that I'm trying to keep running. Last thing I needed to do is build another engine. But I thought to myself here more recently, gosh, you know, I'm always getting less than 20 miles of the gallon with my 2-liter. I love my 2-liter. I love the power characteristics. This is all by far my favorite engine. And you know what? I'm really not needing that kind of power. I'm just going back and forth to yoga, the grocery store, hanging out with Mary, and you know, these carburetors and the carburetor linkage. Recently had a little issue with one of the jets, and then here didn't have anything to do with the power, but I had to replace the generator on it, and you know, I just having to dink with those carburetors, pulling it in and out of the car, and I thought to myself, and my brother's an engineer, we got to talking about engines and different things, and he says, you know, well, why don't you build yourself an economy engine? And I thought, well, you know, yeah, I suppose, well, you know, I could. And I have a stock crankshaft that I took out of a 1776 right here. Still got the rods hanging on it. The journals and bearings are good. My son and I built that and put it in Valerie, my 1966 bug. He took it back to Oregon for a few years and was running around there and didn't have a place to keep it inside and all that rain and wet, and he brought it home, and I think it was I don't know why, but I took it apart to freshen it up. There was some kind of issue that escapes me right now, but I wanted to freshen it up, and I rebuilt the engine and put it back in the car. And you know, if I'm going to build an all-out race engine, I want to have a new case and new parts, and I want it, you know, if I'm going to stress it out, and you're taking a chance with that, and if you know the history of these engines and you take it apart and you've got somebody that can help you with the machine work or do it yourself, they made these engines to be rebuildable. I mean, they didn't have a long life, but they have the 4 different oversized bearings, and it comes in 20,000 steps so that you can line bore it and stuff. And each time you do that, it's probably, you know, it's not that the rebuild has taken the life away from it, but you start cutting away the metal on the crankshaft. This is a standard crankshaft, but you know, you can get them reground to 10 over and under, 20. I've got a 2020 crank that is a welded counterweighted crank, and it's balanced to these 1776 pistons over here. And I have the 1600 pistons and cylinders that came off the 1800 build. I went and charged it into that, ordered 90.5 heads, and it turned out the darn thing was a stock 1600 with an Engel 100 cam in it. It just ran so strong, even though it was worn out. It had the dual cadrons, and I replaced those with these 36 Delordos, and it had the 85.5 stock pistons in it, and this thing it pulled so good when it was just leaking oil everywhere, and the compression was uneven, and it was time to freshen it up. And so I ordered the heads thinking it was either a 1776 or an 1835. It just felt like all the 1776s I've had. This thing was crazy. So then when I got it, and I was waiting for the heads, I tore that down, and it's like, oh, this is a stock block. Well, now what am I going to do? I'm going to have to pay money to go ahead and cut the block, and I was getting mad at myself. And then I went to the AA site and I saw those 88 slip-ins, and I remember Gene Berg had always talked about 88s. You know, they had these special slipper skirt 88s that were supposed to be phenomenal back in the day, and I don't think there's too many of them floating around anymore, but I thought, you know, I'm going to try it because it's got the slip-in stock block, and I know a lot of you guys like the 1641s, but the 88s, although it's thin where it goes in the block, it's actually thicker at the head. The slip-in 87s, to make a 1641, it takes the stock head and block size, and it's thin all the way up and down. And guys used to complain in the old days they had the thin wall 92s, but now they make so many different options. But I wanted to try this, and the only reason I'm not running this engine now is I had an oil leak issue right from the get-go. I thought it was because of a mistake I made. I loosened the case nuts to get the oil pump in and forgot to retorque them, and then I went on a trip with it, and I kept having a leak there, and I just reached underneath there and was going to snug those oil pump bolts down, and one of them just, it got easy. Instead of getting harder, it got easy, and it was just leaking worse and worse. So one of the oil pump studs is stripped out, and I remember when I rebuilt it, one of them had, I took the oil pump off, I kind of looked at it and stuff, and there's a case saver in there, and it was crooked, and I'm not sure which part of that, so I just kind of put it back together, and I set it here and put a different engine in, and I haven't addressed that because I got a feeling it's going to need a new block, and I don't want to spend the money on that because I got so many other options here. So I acquired this engine block, and I've used it as an example because it's a single relief case. When I got this block, I got a set of single port heads that came with it. Okay? Are you with me so far? Now, I want to make an engine that's good mileage and use up some of these parts that I have sitting around the shop here. This is the original 1300 engine case that came out of the 1966 VW sedan I have. We call her Valerie. It doesn't really seem to be in that bad of a shape, but it had a rod knock shortly after my son acquired the car, and he got it from the original owners when he turned 16, and I was totally against him getting that car, but he just had to have it, and we stuffed another engine in there. And so these are the pistons and cylinders off of this block, and you can see there's a step right there. This is number 2. Now, can you just guess? You know, these things are kind of a pain to put oil in when they're in the stock engine compartment, and when you spill over, this number 2 is right under the generator stand, and this is the kind of mess you get. The dirt starts sticking to it. Looks like there's a broken fin there as well. And I think this engine was rebuilt once before. But what they did is they made a little step at the base of the cylinder, and that's how they arrived. And they must have been using the old 77 pistons or something. They're cute little things. They look nice. And you know what? I had a friend that bought a new 66 Volkswagen. He said he had his foot to the floor on that thing all the time and you couldn't hurt it. And it's probably true because it was what they had done in 65 was the last year of the 64 millimeter crankshaft. In 1966, they stroked the crankshaft. They made it 69, and then what they did is the following year they made the 1500, and then they finally come to the 1600. I mean, you got to give a reason to your customers to keep coming back and trading in their junk, right? It's, yeah, the new cars. That's how you convince your wife you got to have that new car. It makes more power, and it's going to do this and it's going to do that. Well, there's nothing the matter with these things. Then they came out with the dual port head and the dual relief case, and then they went to the fuel injection, and that's what all the manufacturers were doing, especially in the 60s. You had your small block Chevys, the small block Fords, and the Chrysler, their little 318 A engine, and then it went to the LA engine. Everybody was, the gas, the oil, everything was getting better. They were having horsepower wars, and the people were buying the stuff. And that's how you get your customers to come back, is you keep making improvements every year. Everybody thinks Volkswagens were the same, but there's changes all along, just like every other manufacturer, and they did things to the engines as well. So at any rate, I took these pistons and cylinders, and they wouldn't fit in these spigot holes. I don't know where this engine case came from. Somebody had already, by the time I got it, line bored the case 20 over, and they put these 10 millimeter steel inserts where the head bolts go. Typically, they just went straight into the block. Well, all I had was a block. I needed the head bolts. They're 10 millimeter, so I took this thing apart, robbed the head bolts off of it, and I might need a couple other odds and ends from it, and then I decided to make the video and stuff. So the goal with this engine is to make an economy engine with one carburetor in the center, and it's going to be hopefully a good grunt motor. I'd always heard that those single port heads gave you more low end and mid-range torque than the dual port heads, and I've seen and talked to rebuilders who said the same things, and I've met people out on the trail who really were adamant about having that little single port engine. So the cylinders wouldn't fit. The 1600 cylinders wouldn't fit in here. I just want to build a stock engine, so I needed to have this cut, and I wanted to know more about the engine, so I took it down to Denver to a place that works on Volkswagens, and they looked at it, and it doesn't have any numbers on the case below the generator stand. Typically, if this engine was in a car, they would have the numbers stamped right down here on the bottom, and then you could look it up in a catalog and find out what it originally came from, what year. So don't have any of that information and don't have the history on it. So cautiously, kind of creeping along here. This one has 8 millimeter oil pump bolts. The other one is 6, and that's not really that hard to do. Just drill out and retap them. I definitely want to run a filter, and yes, I do like those bolt-on filter pumps that CB Performance sells. There's different companies that make them, but they use a Scheideck pump. I like the Scheideck oil pumps. They make a very good pump. That one is, the gears are keyed to the shafts in there, and they won't slip, and they work well, and it's 26 millimeter. I ordered a 6 millimeter pump, and then I don't know. I'm still not done yet. I could take the pistons I have on the bench and put this thing back together as a 1600 and use that other oil pump. I got a lot of options here. I've still got a lot of options. And I've got all the big motors I could ever dream about. I'm very happy with them. I'm not a drag racer. I have tried my hand at it, and I don't do well at the light. And here's the crankshaft that we've had for a long time. This is a standard crank. It's used. It was in a 1776, and when I rebuilt it, I just decided I wanted to go with the counterweighted crank, and that's what's in Valerie right now. I went through the thing. I put new pistons, cylinders, counterweighted crank. Believe I used rebuilt stock connecting rods. So it's a sweet engine in there. I really haven't been impressed with it. It's been parked for a couple of years here, and I've been driving it around lately, and it's like, man, that's a nice engine. Why have I got this gas hog over here in this car? And most of the time I'm driving around town, so I thought, I'm going to build another 1776, and I'm going to put it in Rusty here. If I want the big engine, if I'm going to go on a long trip, I'll probably put the 2-liter back in. That's one of my favorite engines, and it's proved itself. I went to Michigan and back with that 2-liter. Didn't even have to adjust the valves, and it had the power. Yeah, with these bigger wheels and tires, you need a little bit more torque. So I'm real curious to see if I can build this 1776 single-port engine with the small 30-pick-1 carburetor and get better gas mileage and just have a used engine with a lot of money. I'm not putting a lot of money in it. This is going to be in a kind of an economy build, and there's so many of you guys out there just getting into the sport, and there's young people taking an interest, and they got an oily, leaky mess. So, you know, there's nothing the matter. Everybody wants the bigger engines, but I would have built this as a 1600 if I didn't have to have the case cut. But since I had it cut and I had the parts around, I had the heads cut, and I had, I'm going to put used pistons and cylinders in it, and I'm going to buy a brand new camshaft, and I haven't decided exactly what. We're going to make a little camshaft video here, and I'm just cautiously putting this thing together because I don't know, most of the work was done. I don't know why somebody didn't finish it. And there's places over here where they kind of pried the case apart, and I've kind of dressed it down with a file. And there's a lot of rough edges here inside. I think this engine was, you know, it's not new. It was used before and worked fine. But I think I'm going to get like a little a burr, which is something like this right here. And I'm just going to put it in my drill, and I'm going to go ahead and clean up a lot of corners and edges that appear to me to be rough. Now, on the one hand, you could see where the factory made all these ridges here. That's not just for that took an effort. That wasn't just a haphazard thing. The more that increases the surface area. And the big thing with an air-cooled engine is the more surface area you have here to transfer heat, that's how you help cool these engines down. And they did that all over the place. It can give you strength. You've got the big ribs here that can give you strength. I'm not doing anything with that. I'm staying away from the sealing edges here. But when they cut the cases, it seemed like there was a little bit of a roughness there. And I want to address that. So, whoop, whoop, whoop. Let's see, will anything fall out? I don't think so. Okay. Like when they cut it, like all around this edge is just kind of jagged, and these corners here are kind of sharp. So I'm just going to go through there on a drill and just real carefully, you know, smooth that out. There's the ventilation port here. That's kind of a rough casting right from the factory. This is a crossover. Oh, that side, man, that's sharp enough. That's original, and that could almost feel sharp enough it could cut you. I'll probably taper this off over here. This really doesn't make any difference for a stock engine, but if you're building an ultra high RPM engine, race type engines and stuff, you got so much air turbulence in the case that you can. Every little thing when you're racing, especially, I don't know how they do it now for classes and things like that. You know, it's all the attention to the small things that makes one guy stand out in the crowd and be the winner. You know, and that only comes from years of experience. You know, trial and error, breaking things. It costs a lot of money to race, and there's not too many people that just go making videos and show everything that they do. You got to look for it. You got to find a little nugget here and there. My lifter boards feel nice and smooth on this. I'm looking inside here, and it's like, doggone it, that just makes me just wonder what the heck was the history on this engine case. But it's single relief, and it's got smaller ports in it. I believe these early engines had 22 millimeter oil pumps in it, and the replacement pump I got is 26. And you have to be careful because the pickup is smaller. The pickup diameter tube is smaller. I've got a Doghouse style oil cooler. I'm not sure if I'm going to go with the Doghouse fan shroud. And the reason I'm going to do it is because I'm making a moderate here. I'm increasing the displacement. That's the most reliable and easiest way to increase your power is there's no substitute for displacement. You can make small engines, you can get a lot of power out of a small engine, but you're creating stress. And if you build a bigger displacement engine, you've got a bigger cylinder to hold the fuel, and you get the bigger bang. With the smaller engine, trying to make a lot of power with a smaller engine, and there is a point where it's not, on your horsepower curve, there's at some point with displacement, there's a spot where it sort of like flattens out, and it's not, you've got a lot of mass. If you're going to go high RPM, you're creating more problems for yourself, So the idea here is to make some longevity. I've got these straight cut steel cam gears that I didn't use on that 1800 build, and I don't know how much noise they make. And the nice thing about this build, we were looking at the oil pump and the oil pickup here. Okay, the oil pickup diameter is a lot smaller. It's a single relief case. They had a smaller oil pump. So I really don't want to try to make a big, strong engine out of this thing. I mean, strong, yeah, but you know what I'm saying here. This isn't something that you'd want to use for a 2110 or I don't even know if I'd want to make a 2-liter out of it, but we'll find out together here, and it might give you an idea too. And I always say to people, rebuild what you got and make your dream engine with new parts and plan it out and use the best parts that you can afford when you're building your high horsepower. And if you don't know what you're doing and you have the money, an engine kit from CB Performance, they've done all the guesswork out of you. That basically is good parts ready to go. They are probably in the United States as far as technology and having the equipment. Have you guys seen that new video? I was posting this one and it came up like right after mine, and I watch them from time to time. It's called Combi Life, and these guys been traveling around the world in a VW bus and had a lot of problems and had a lot of fun, but they stopped in California and they got special transmission and engine. CB Performance built them the awesomest little engine for that thing and tested it out, and that fuel injection. I mean, if carburetors were so great, I think new cars would have carburetors on them. Fuel injection is awesome. It's the way to go if you got the money. Where I take my cars off-road up here in the mountains, sometimes there's no cell phone reception and I'm caught off there by, I don't tell people where I'm going. I just see a little road and say, hey, I wonder where that goes. And there's getting less and less of that to find, and I've explored a lot of them around here close to home, but sometimes it's fun to go back just because I like driving. I like driving a manual car. That's why I have a Volkswagen. And at any rate, if I have trouble, I want to be able to hopefully have a better chance of fixing it on the trailer, keeping it going, limping back to the main road. I think I learned my lesson on driving all the way back home. I think I would leave because the last time I got into trouble and heard a little knocking noise, I should have known better. But I had the 1776 with so many years, 20-some years, and it just seemed like it was indestructible. And when the cam went away or the lifter or whatever happened, maybe it was the cylinder bore, but I chose to drive at 60 miles home. Even at slow speed, it just destroyed the case. And the case was fourth over. That was another reason. I just chose to do it because, there wasn't any people out there. It was during the week. It wasn't on the weekend. And, I trashed that case. And that's where the crankshaft, the welded counterweighted crankshaft came out of it. And those pistons, and they're balanced together, the 1776 pistons and that counterweighted crank. And I could put that in here, but it's a 2020 crank, and I have this standard crank, and this is cut 20 over, so that doesn't scare me. none of this really scares me. I just need to put it together, and I just need to be careful and measure things as I go and do some of the things I've learned over the years. And if I want to put dual port heads on it, all I have to do is change these two head bolts here to the shorter ones that I already have from that other engine case. Change out these two head bolts, and I can put a dual port head on this in a matter of pretty darn quick. And I've already got dual port heads, but I want to see for myself how these single port heads, what kind of difference they make on mileage and low end torque. So that's what we're doing here. I'm glad you could come along, and I love your comments one way or the other down below. And thanks for telling me that you got a little tired of that music, but you know, there is this new device out. It's called volume control, and if you don't like that music playing in the background while the video's on, you can turn it off. And I guess you wouldn't know that because you're thinking I might start talking or saying something, but I got your message. You don't like those kind of videos, and if I do make those kind of videos in the future, maybe I'll just edit them with the microphone or something like that along with it. There's lots of options here. I try to keep it mixed up and keep it interesting, keep you guys coming back. I really enjoy interacting with you, and I am going to be using shutters and a stock thermostat. Yes, indeed, I am going to do that. I don't think I'm going to use these divider plates for air deflectors. I like that Type 3 cool tin. I got it on most of my engines, and you can still run the bottom tin if you want, but I think it really does a great job of helping it cool. In a stock engine with a totally stock setup in a car, you can't beat stock. It's proven, and it works. You start experimenting, and then you're on your own. But there are certain things that people have done over the years that have proven themselves to work out. And when you've got an engine that's hanging out in the open and you don't want to be hitting things on the bottom, then maybe that cool tin is for you. And it came out, that cool tin is not something that's somebody invented. They came up with it for the Type 3 engine. And that's why it's out there, because those pancake motors had a tendency to run a little hot. It was a heavier car and all that. They made a little more power, but they did run hot, and a little different setup, but you can interchange some things. Some things are, you might think it's an improvement, you might not. Maybe you're a purist, but at any rate, I'm babbling. I'll turn you back on. There's a few interesting things that I found already I'm gonna share with you. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for subbing. TheEZGZ out. See you next time. Head out and have some fun. But wait! There's more! I need a burrito. That's what I need.